Welcome back to AgriTalk, Lodi, California, outside of Sacramento. We're here talking about the immigration issue. By the way, Ag Day National reporter Tyne Morgan is here too. You'll see a lot of her coverage of this issue, some of her stories coming up in the next few days on Ag Day. So be watching for that. Hopefully next week she'll be able to have some of those stories ready to go for you, and I think you'll learn even more about this issue. We're talking with Marc Grossman, a spokesman for United Farm Workers of America, and joining us now, Rayne Pegg, Manager of Federal Policy for the California Farm Bureau. Rayne, thank you for joining us. I would imagine this is a critical issue for Farm Bureau members here in California.
It is. It's kind of an optimistic time that finally Congress is taking this issue seriously, and we're seeing a work product that is really a compromise. So it means it didn't make everyone happy, but it's a real compromise, and it faces the realities of the situation that we're facing throughout the nation.
What are your thoughts? We've heard some interesting perspective here from Marc with the United Farm Workers of America, and earlier with Wendy and Barb, people who are on the front lines of this. Is this pretty common, what you're hearing throughout the state?
It is. It's really common. We surveyed our farmers last year in 2012 and found that 61% are reporting shortages in those labor-intensive crops. And really what Wendy and Barb talked about, Barb especially talked about, they're having to make those decisions about whether or not they don't harvest, and really thinking about the long term. Maybe I can survive this year, but what happens next year and what happens the year after that is really the concern.
And I would think in a state like California with a lot of pressures already on agriculture, environmental pressures, maybe urban sprawl, things like that, if someone like Barb goes out of business, that land may go out of production. Is that right? We could lose that production.
Right. Really, what are the alternatives? And I think that's what farmers debate is, if I don't have labor for this, what am I going to have labor for? There is mechanism, but, that's really only for certain crops where we're seeing mechanism. And also it's for those that can make that investment. So you could have olives and you could decide, hey, I'm going to go into mechanization. Well, I have to rip out my current orchards and put in new ones that fit that machinery, and that's quite an investment that medium and small farmers really can't make. So, sometimes people say, oh, it's just easy, just turn to another crop. Well, another crop could take several years to fruit, so it's not as easy as people think.
And for consumers, even those critical of migrant workers, I don't know what that tipping point is, but there is a tipping point when they start seeing less food available to them and much higher prices for it. Then you realize it starts hitting home a little more then.
It does, and I think as well as recognizing where your food comes from, I think a lot of people really don't recognize the bounty that California and the rest of the nation creates throughout the entire year to offer you such variety that you have in the grocery store today. And that could be coming from other countries other than the United States.
Have you at Farm Bureau here in California been part of the effort to try to get U.S. citizens to fill some of these jobs? Have you checked into whether or not there's interest there?
We have. Marc talked about the example of, take our jobs. There's been a lot of efforts to try and get domestic workers to take these jobs, and farmers would love to have domestic workers to take these jobs, but a lot of people don't. They don't want to work in the fields. It's very hard work. Much like the next generation doesn't want to take on the farm. These younger generations, you want to work at a Starbucks or a mall, which is understandable. And we're just really not seeing that interest from the domestic population in working in agriculture. And it really is the reality that we're facing right now.
Come back to you, Marc. I'm going to talk more about this border security issue because it seems like it could be the stumbling block to the bill itself being able to pass. Even if there is support for the guest worker program, the overall bill could come down to that border security. You were talking about you think the border is secure or more secure. Others don't feel that way.
Well, to some extent, we already have border security. The Obama administration has deported more undocumented workers, immigrants, than ever before. It is much, much more difficult to get across the border today than it used to be. You see really much less crossings than they used to have. So I think a lot of progress has already been made on that front. The issue that needs to be resolved is what about the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country now, about 1 million of whom are farm workers? What do we do with them? Do we give them a path to legal status? let them, this is not amnesty, such as in the 1986 immigration reform law, where all you had to do was be here as of a certain date and you could stay. This is, people have to show a documented employment history. They have to pass national security and criminal background checks. You cannot be a felon. And you have to agree to work in the agricultural industry, in the case of farm workers, for between 5 and 7 more years. So, you know, in many ways, this is not the same immigration reform proposal that we've seen before.
But Rayne, a lot of people still look upon it as amnesty.
They do, but you know, the reality is right now we don't know necessarily who are the 11 million people. I mean, this bill really does improve security, because now we'll have an identity with each one of those people, and they'll be going through background checks, and we'll be making the determination whether or not they should stay in the country. Right now, that is not occurring. People are using different identities, they're moving throughout the country, they're working in different jobs, and this bill would provide for an identity for those individuals, and we'd be making that determination on whether or not they deserve to stay here in America and be a part of our communities.
You know, Mike, one thing I think is important, you know, to understand, you know, people say, well, they're here illegally, they're lawbreakers, they're criminals even. I think it's important to know, well, exactly what law is being broken. Being in this country without legal documentation is not a criminal offense. It is an infraction. It's like if you were to put an addition onto your home and not have the right city permits, or if you get a traffic ticket. You know, so to say that these people are criminals is both inaccurate and unfair.
So the bills in Congress that we heard on the House side, it may be a step-by-step approach. I'm not sure what that means, but there's still a long ways to go. But I guess our point is here, it's really critical for U.S. agriculture.
It is really critical for U.S. agriculture. I mean, if we don't get it done now, we're not going to see anything done for several years to come. And it is the reality of the food that is brought to your table every single day is grown by farmers and farm workers working side by side.
Rayne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rayne Pegg, Manager of Federal Policy for California Farm Bureau, and Marc Grossman, spokesman for United Farm Workers. Marc, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
Tomorrow we'll be at the offices of the California Farm Bureau. We want to talk about GMO labeling, we want to talk about Proposition 2 for the poultry industry, and much more. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Adams. This is AgriTalk.